Kenny, thank you for letting me in your house. It seems weird that it's my face and not John Anik's face because I've watched this rectangle many, many times. I'll introduce you briefly. There'll be some people listening who will go, yeah, duh. And then there'll be some people who'll be like, who's the dude Joe's talking to? So Kenny, you UFC veteran with fought in 4 divisions, which I think is the most unspoken about part. People talk about fighting for the title, BJ Penn fight, all these fights, but 4 divisions is utterly insane. Then I think even possibly more interesting is life after that. Commentary, incredible podcasting. One of my son's friends only knows you as the guy from TV. So I think it's interesting that you've lived 4 or 5 lives in a kind of Josh Waitskin way. You have you must be in some sense very good at learning, right? Because you've done 4 or 5 of these things.
You're very kind. You're very kind. I'm kind of hard on myself, so I always feel like I should be doing more. I think growing up, I always felt like I was kind of out of the know. My parents were from Peru. So I'm first generation here from the United States. And, my mom, when she came to this country, actually didn't speak the language. She kind of had to learn on her own. I'm one of 6. So luckily I kind of a little bit further on down the line, but I always felt like I was kind of lost in the shuffle of all my brothers and sisters. And, always felt like I didn't really know what the heck was going on. And I always felt like I kind of had to learn stuff on my own and figure out kind of what was the best process for me. Yeah. I just kind of, I don't know. I always took to kind of physical activities and things like soccer, or as you would say, football. I played tennis, 2 very manly sports. Actually growing up, my parents wouldn't even let me play hockey because they said it was too violent. But
well, you showed them.
Yeah, exactly. And I was kind of always kind of a little bit of the rebel of the family. I always did things a little bit differently and tried to follow that. I always kind of would isolate myself to a certain extent just because I came from a not only a Latin family, but also a family from Boston. And we are very loud in Boston. So I kind of needed that kind of solace and that solitary confinement, if you will, to reset myself. And that was very helpful. And I'm not sure exactly where I'm going with this, but that's kind of a little bit about my background and how I learned.
About that.
Yeah.
The thing that I'm trying to figure out, that we're trying to figure out, is what ingredients do you need to be good at something, and how do you put those ingredients together? And I think that probably the starting point for that is before you went on the journey of learning football, of learning jiu-jitsu, of Muay Thai, of combining MMA, all those things, of just what were your school reports like?
Yeah.
I mean, like 10-year-old Kenny, what do they say?
Right. Yeah. No, I think probably the general consensus was he should be working, or maybe not working as hard as he should have. I think the general consensus was like the talent was there, but I maybe didn't work as hard. I would kind of space out during class a little bit. I would do a lot of daydreaming. And I also, I didn't like the structure of school so much. And I think I had a lot of energy as a kid, and I needed to be outside first. Like I wish I had recess first. I wish we got to play outside first and then had the opportunity to go to school, because anytime I was sitting at a desk, it was just like, I was like, I want to be outside. I want to run. I want to do this. I want to do that. And that would always kind of reset myself. And even to this day, like, I think later on, even as an adult, I figured out that I was much happier when I was doing things when I was physical. It was almost like, even with jiu-jitsu, I almost felt like after I started doing jiu-jitsu, and this was very early on, Joe, I almost felt like my brain kind of came together with like Legos, and it was just like a fit. I was like, oh, I can actually relax and focus on things now. So I was kind of scatterbrained as a kid, and I had this nervous energy that I didn't really know what to do with.
Yeah, there was you may have heard this because you are a dog owner, but there's a Cesar Millan quote, which is exercise, discipline, affection, always in that order. And when I said this to my wife, she giggled to herself and said, that's how I've been training you for years, which is, she just sends me out in the morning.
Right.
Like, she'll say, like, are you doing the early class tomorrow, or are you running in the morning? And that is basically get the shithead out, come back, and be a little calmer. Now, can I ask, of those days when you were looking for these things, do you think your parents recognized, like, would they recognize the Kenny now with the Kenny then?
I think they probably wouldn't. You know, I was like a pretty sweet, like gentle, quiet kid for the most part. You know, I was social when I had my friends around, but I was pretty quiet around the house. And I used to get a little bit of anxiety being in social situations for a long time. Sometimes I still do. I don't like big crowds. I don't like concerts and things like that. I like listening to music. I'll go with my wife every once in a while, go to a concert, but I'm not like comfortable. Like, it takes me a little while to settle in. With the crowd, it just makes me a little uneasy. I don't know what it is, but, yeah, I think it took me a little while to settle in. And I think that's where like jiu-jitsu really made me more confident in those types of situations. And it made me a little bit more relaxed. And it also gave me a more direct process on how to approach things. And I guess we can get into that as far as learning. But I think, you know, I guess the first element to learning is there has to be that certain level of interest or passion in whatever it is that you're seeking. So I think that's probably the first element to a certain extent, is there needs to be that level of interest to the point where you go, this is important, or I think this is important, or I feel a little tingly when I talk about this, or I learn about this. And that is that first thing that kind of gets the water boiling, I think.
It's interesting. I was going to ask you that because about the relationship between football and then jiu-jitsu is there is a poem, a story basically about teaching, which is where they say you can go to the village and you can teach them to build a boat, and you can teach them to find the right tree, and you can teach them to sharpen an axe and to chop the tree down. You can teach every process of it, or you can instill the yearning for the deep blue sea, and they'll figure it out. So can you just talk about that thing? Because I've heard you talk about the kind of Boston College football thing, which was, I mean, I'm really simplifying, obviously, a complex moment of your life, but that it is skill possibly lacking the desire for the deep blue sea. Would that be fair? Yeah,
a little bit, you know, a little bit. And it was nice in that failure points to the right direction. It leads us to the way eventually. And as long as you're learning and listening, and I think that was probably the most important thing. I think as a kid, I thought that you either got it or you didn't. I was lucky enough that I had good talent for soccer. But at a certain point, I think I stopped working as hard as I should, and others started to kind of surpass me a little bit. And I think in some ways I would kind of point to things and go, oh, well, that was a political thing, or, you know, I didn't get the shot. And then in some ways, to my detriment, you know, maybe my dad or some friends would be like, yeah, man, you should have got it. And that's BS. You should have got this and that. And I would kind of make excuses for myself. But I think looking back after a little while, I said, you know what? I don't know if I was actually doing as much work as I should have. Now, hey, did I train a lot? Did I play a lot of soccer? 100%. I was playing year round. I was on different teams. I was on the elite teams, all this, and I would play in my backyard all the time. But was I doing enough to be elite? You know, it's like, hey, there's enough to make it to D1. There's enough to Division I level in college. There's enough to make it to the professional level. And there's enough to be like the best amongst professionals. Yeah. And there's varying amounts of work that you need to put in to get to there. And I'm not sure I like really understood it. Like, hey, if you want to be the best, you need to do above and beyond what everyone else is doing. You need to do what others are not doing, actually, not only in your methodology, but in the amount of work. So when I started doing martial arts, when I started with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I had that like right behind me. I had this chip on my shoulder. Like, I am not going to do the same thing that I did with soccer. Like, I'm out of time here. I'm training, you know, at 19, 20 years old. Other guys in Brazil are starting when they were little kids. I don't have any time to lose. So I kind of just like went head first and trained like a maniac. And of course, had the benefit of having brothers to train with and practice with, which was a huge aid in my development because not only it made me very competitive because they wanted to kick my butt all the time, but also they gave me direct feedback when I needed it. You know, I remember there was a time when I was at Gracie Barra for the first time, and I was training okay, and my brother was like killing it. He was doing awesome, and he was just like a little killer. And he came over to me after the training session, and he's like, "Dude, I'm watching you train. What are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean? I'm just training." He's like, No. He's like, "You're not training like you are in Boston." He's like, "Why are you letting these guys like kick your ass?" And I was like, I don't know. You know, he told me critical things when I needed to hear it. Like, Keith is not one to beat around the bush, my younger brother. And I think having someone to keep you honest about those things, who care about you, for better or worse, not to say he was right all the time or I was right all the time, but to have that freedom and confidence, I guess, to tell you certain things that you need to hear, was critical.
Now, is that you have this talk? Is the next, like, what's the next level then? You're rolling and you're maybe just not committing or whatever the thing is. Actually, I'll tell you a funny story about you for a second. Well, okay. It's a funny story about me, but we were rolling and I was playing lazy fucking Z-guard or something. And you won't remember this. And I went to sweep you and I didn't get it. But afterwards you said it was a basic sweep. But you said, your technique is better than mine. And I was like, inside, I was like, yes. And you said, but when I do it, I know I'm going to get it. And when you do it, you think you're going to get it. And there is something about that difference of like, whether that is, I didn't fully extend my spine and look, or like you can have the grips, you can have the movement, you can have the position. But if it's not 100% against somebody who's good, it's just not a thing, right? So what was that thing that got you to the next level of commitment? Was it taking notes? Was it getting to class early? What's that thing?
Great question, man. So I took notes. I probably have books and journals of notes since when I started as a white belt to now, the present day. Now I just use my phone, but I think the main thing was seeing that person across from me wasn't this magical Brazilian guy. Mm-hmm. He wasn't this black belt or purple belt or brown belt or world champion. He was a blank face, mm-hmm. or whoever it was that I was going against in reality is just this blank face. It's this body who's just like me, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I'm going with this legend guy. Mm-hmm. Well, jiu-jitsu works against anybody who does it correctly and who commits to it. And I think once that really was understood and like really believed, then I go, like it was almost a constant lesson throughout my career. I certainly did that against BJ Penn. You know, I fought BJ Penn, the black belt, the first American black belt world champion, and the two-time two-division UFC champion. I didn't fight BJ Penn, the human being who is flawed and, right. Which we all are. And I think that was a big wake up moment, or there was a series of kind of ahas throughout my life where, you know, sometimes if it's not us, we give that person way more credit. And then if it's us, we actually like, are more critical of ourselves. It's like, oh, well, it was me. So I'm just an idiot and I can't do this right. And blah, 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 whatever it is, like whatever psychological stuff we come into this world with, or whatever we grew up with, we kind of bring that baggage with us. And it's extremely important to know that, you know, jiu-jitsu doesn't care what you think. Jiu-jitsu cares what is correct. And that is something that I even to this day, I try to tell myself. And there's been performances where I was able to get to that flow state and not see anything, not feel anything, just do. And then there's been other moments where it was so much of a struggle, so much of an unnecessary struggle, because there was this background noise that was operating that was telling me otherwise.
That's the relationship between like thinking thought and unthinking thought, right? Is getting to that thing. But can I ask practically, not Kenny the black belt, not Kenny the instructor, Kenny in the Gracie Barra or wherever, or even like with Faraz or whatever it might be, could you just tell me, leading up to the class, during the class, and after the class, do you step in thinking, today I am going to control from knee on belly? This is going to be my thing today. I'm not going to tell anyone, but do you set yourself tasks? And then when you're in there, I mean, I found early on that I need to take notes, written notes, and I need to watch YouTube just to get the information to come in through different holes. But like,
yes,
how did you learn to learn, and what was the thing you did?
Gosh, that's a very complicated question. You know, I think like all of those things are correct. I think I am kind of, it depends on and when you catch me. Some of those things are definitely true. I will go in with a very specific plan. I'm going to work this position. And I think this is where jiu-jitsu in general kind of gets things wrong. I think that there's certainly like the drilling aspect of like, I'm going to go over this thing that I'm learning and I'm going to get into my body, into my system until my body is just fluid with it. But then there's the aspect of like, okay, now I'm going to work this position live against a resisting opponent who doesn't know what I'm going to necessarily be working on. So that's almost a different thing altogether. And then I think the highest level is when there is nothing to do and there's no direct plan. And that is like a special place for me because I really started directing my energy towards that more and more, even to this day. Like, so I think, first of all, a self-defense situation in general is rarely predictable, right? It's like it never goes down the way you think it's going to go down. You know, whether it's a fight that's unpredictable or some situation that may result in you having to defend yourself. So I thought about that and I go, well, what is the mind state and what is the technique or sets of techniques or principles that I need to be studying in order to prepare for the unknown? And I think that is kind of a deeper question. And that's kind of more about how life hits us. It's like, man, life is crazy. Life is unpredictable. It is volatile. How do I prepare for that? What is the mind state? What is the preparation? And all of that goes with it, to the point, Joe, where when I was in LA teaching, I would purposely go, I don't have a plan today of what I'm going to work on. I'm going to go in there and try to teach from an empty place and actually approach it with the students, asking questions back and forth, and we're going to discover this together from first principles in regards to, hey, what if everything we've known about this position is totally incorrect? What if whatever preconceived ideas about this certain thing is not totally the most accurate thing? And let's take this from the very beginning and go, how does this work? Why does this work? When does this work? And let's approach this together as a class. And I would get so much out of it as a teacher because I would get a question and I'd be like, I didn't think about that. Let's work through this. So I found a lot of benefits as a practitioner through that selfishly, but I also found that the students felt more part of the process and we all kind of learned better together. And like you said, kind of earlier in that regard, I can tell you about a certain thing. It's like, you know, if we tell our kid, hey, make sure you never do this. And of course they're going to go, yeah, whatever, dad. And they're going to do it and they kind of do their own thing. But when it actually happens, that's when they learn, right? When they kind of fall on their face, for better or worse, and they go, oh, that resonates with me. Now I understand. So there's so much of like that direct response of failure is an absolute when it comes to learning and learning at a higher level. We must fail in order to advance to that next level. Can we learn by just doing things correctly straight away? Yeah, absolutely. But at the highest levels, there needs to be some amount of failure so we can kind of right the ship, if you will.
It's very weird that like 4 weeks ago, I quoted Mark Twain in something, and I think I've quoted this thing every day since then. And we just keep getting to this place, which is good decisions come from experience, and experience comes from bad decisions.
I like
so
that.
it's having that. But let me ask a question about that. Is that one of the things I think people would agree is there was a calmness to you. So can I just like navigate backwards from that? There was a calmness in the ring, right? And so it is, the people that are going to listen to this are in stressful creative situations. If creativity and sensitivity are almost the same thing, that makes sense? You have to be open and sensitive to be creative. But you're navigating it in a world of brutality. How do you navigate that duality in yourself?
Gosh, yeah, awesome question. Okay, so I think that there's two main drivers of that. First, a part of being human is dealing with problems. How we deal with that problem, it comes down to our nature, our experience, and all that stuff. It's interesting. My wife has like an amazing patience with little things that come, like little things. Like I'll literally spill water. I'll be like, "Gosh, that was so dumb. Why did I do that?" And then there'll be some like intense situation. I don't know if there's a car, and this happened like months back. There was a car that had flipped, and it was like literally like movie type thing, gasoline leaking from the car, fire could explode, and I like all of a sudden get super super calm, and my wife like is freaking out like about seeing this, so like I get more calm with more intense situations, and then I get upset when there's like little stupid situations that happen for whatever reason. And I think it's because I've trained myself to be that way, obviously, like getting ready for a fight. Now problems will allow us to get creative if we allow it. The key is calming our mind down and allowing it to do what it does. If we allow that event to kind of lead us so much to the point where we are thinking about like all the crazy things that's going on in the moment, then that becomes the driver of our emotions, if that makes sense. So there's the problems that allow us to be creative. And then there's also a silence. And I think that both can be extremely powerful, but I can't tell you how many times, especially like around the COVID era when training was like shut down significantly, my brain could not shut off, and I became more creative with my jiu-jitsu during that time period than any moment maybe in my life. And I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that. And it's because I wasn't able to like physically do that. And I found that these thoughts and these ideas were coming from, I want to say nowhere, but obviously it was coming from somewhere. And it was a lot of times like before I was going to sleep and I wasn't thinking about anything. And all of a sudden I think about a position. I would literally see it in my head very vividly. And I go, wait a sec, this might be a position. Last week, I actually like was coming up with ways to actually like refine the arm lock to the point where I feel like I've been doing the arm lock wrong all along. And it's just like little things where it kind of comes out of nowhere. Sometimes it's an idea maybe that I saw and it just happens to like be this seed that gets planted and then it starts growing, and I didn't know it was growing. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, wow, I have an idea, so where it comes from, I'm not exactly sure, but I think silence or whatever it is, that void can be this amazing breeding ground for creativity, and also some kind of problem that we're experiencing. How elegant we are during that creativity process is kind of up to us. But I think that's kind of where the art comes into it. In whatever it is we do, it's like and also the balance of science, like what are the principles that we're using, and then how can we utilize those principles to become like creative, and how do we make those things beautiful and different from what's being done?
Yeah, it's a really lovely way to put it, because I actually, until this point, hadn't thought about COVID like that. It was rough for lots and lots of people, but what it did do is it gave us, there's no event coming up. There's nothing to peak for. It was, you knew that there's no performance here and it becomes possibly more playful. I have learned things and I've made up a whole system from seatbelt that I use against wrestlers. And I made it up with my wife and son in the garage because
Exactly.
they can't attack me. So we play so light. And then I am aware of sensibilities, but also of I could grab my own arm here. And that's really hard to do when 230-pound blue belt is seeing if your head will come off your shoulders.
The operative word I think you use there is play.
Yeah.
Like play. What happened to play? Like we're adults now and we no longer play. I think that's what makes the ideas of a child so amazing. And it's like people can tell you, oh man, once you have kids, it's an amazing process. And you kind of nod your head like, that makes sense. And then you have a child and you see how they go about this learning process. And I think that's one of the main things that we've lost and why we stop learning is because we lose that mind of a child. We learn, we forget that we learn best when we're playing.
Yeah. And lack of judgment, right? We're not trying to figure out if we're right or not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That becomes this huge impediment towards taking any steps forward because we are afraid of failure. We're afraid of doing this thing. And the idea of play is absolutely essential for creativity. How do we know it's going to work? Well, we can create and experiment in this safe play environment to improve. And I think that's like one of the main things that I like to do. And I always did when I was fighting. And people would always be like, oh, Kenny, man, are you okay today? Like the session's really not going well. And I'd be like, dude, I'm working on something new. Like I'm just playing. Like even like to this day, like people will be like, man, Kenny, what's wrong, man? Like this like guy that you're supposed to be better than him. Yeah. Like, I'm like, no, I'm not going to get better if I do. I already know what I can do. Yeah. I need to like work on things that I'm not sure I can do, like to a higher level. And you're going to tap me and I'm going to make mistakes, but let's catch up in a couple months and let's see what happens. Like it's going to be different, I think, so I think that's super important of doing that. And hey, you know what? I definitely get embarrassed and my ego gets bruised for sure when I'm in that process, but it's just the best way to learn. Like I think with anything, long-term thinkers win. Short-term thinkers will do fine in the short run, but I think in general we should always be thinking like, what's the long-term goal with this?
Okay, so let me ask something about that because you have. You've had some kind of high-profile coaches, right? Who were certainly at the moment, still now, are on the edge of progressive jiu-jitsu thinking. And I heard this quote in reference to Buddhism, but also in reference to Muay Thai, which was 100 monks, 100 religions. So we're doing the same thing, but our internalization of it is slightly different. So I'm not expecting you to big up any coaches or throw any coaches under the bus, but because we all absorb this stuff differently and because the religion is taught slightly differently, were there moments where you were aware that this coach is controlling me in a way that's, and I don't mean in a role, I mean like you walk into a room and you go, I'm learning here. Were there moments where the religion that was passed on was received really easily?
Definitely. Definitely. And that was one thing, you're spot on, dude. I think that those are things that I would always try to be in tune with, even as a kid. And certain things rub me the wrong way. Certain things rub me the right way. And I never did well with an authoritarian type coach. If someone's like, this is the way it is. I had this Irish coach in college who was very much that way. It was like, no one gets to touch the ball more than twice. It's going to be this like very mechanical, structured type of play, and it just like broke my brain. I needed to have more of like a fluid, beautiful style of game, more of a Latin style of game, and we butted heads all the time because of it. If people were kind of yelling at me, like as a kid, I would just kind of freak out and shut down, like so many. Like that makes sense, right? But the coaches that allowed me to play, the coaches that played themselves, like in a fun way, of like allowed you to learn, almost like two cats playing with a ball of yarn.
Yeah.
That always resonated with me, because I said, this is art. This is an understanding. This is a play. This is getting me to fall without hurting myself. And that was always really palatable to me, and something that I could pick up and learn. So I always looked for that, even at a young age, and really ran towards it.
Okay, so I think like this conversations about creativity can go forever. Mm-hmm. But when we take who we are, who our parents think we are, our siblings, who we think we are, and then we have that, we figured out that if jiu-jitsu is a language, you have to learn the letters first. And then you learn the words and then sentences. And at some point you progress. I don't know when that is, but you progress to being able to express yourself. Mm-hmm. But this is training. What is in my mind now, I'm talking about an actual fight, be it a jiu-jitsu competition, UFC fight, whatever or even a Argus, a self-defense moment. When you think about and talk about and teach the relationship between, and I'm not going to quote Mike Tyson here, but the relationship between a game plan and then the moment, because you've studied tape on Clay Guida. You've seen his stance. You see when he switches. You see when he steps outside. You've seen that a feint normally leads to a. You've spent that time and you know this person, you have a game plan. Can you just talk about the relationship between a game plan and that thing that we're always kind of chasing, flow state, whatever you call it? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, for sure. I think there is a very important interplay between the macro and the micro. And by that, I mean, there's like the general idea of how things work, right? Like, what are the physics involved of what's at play? Like, those are the things that are unchanging. And those are the truths. Now, I don't think there are many truths in fighting. Like, there's not a whole lot. However, they constantly show themselves over and over and over again. Like the box of truth is like small, but they are ever present everywhere. Then so that would be like the macro, like make sure we're following those truths. But then we get into the micro, the more granular stuff of, hey, he likes to dip his head down here. What do we do to problem solve for this? Like, is it a kick upstairs? Is it a level change? So looking for those kind of general patterns of, hey, this is where they're vulnerable. And I also try to think it in terms of this. And I guess it's this simple. And it's, how do I bring all of the forces into my favor, and how do I take away all of the forces in their favor? Like, if I do something, if I'm like, hey, Joe, I'm going to get into boxing range and I'm going to just try to knock you out. And you're like, hey, that's great, Kenny. You know what? You probably hit harder than Joe. And someone from the outside looking in who may not know fighting very well is like, that's a great idea, Kenny. Like, Joe doesn't have as much striking as you. You should get into boxing range and knock him out. Now, the assumption is that that's going to happen. However, because I'm in boxing range, you can also hit me too. and sometimes we think like, hey, there's that guy and I'm going to go kick his ass, or I'm going to go do this and that. Well, what can they do to you? And I think about this a lot, and I discuss this a lot with like my, some of the fighters that I work with and stuff like that is, I don't know, like let's take Superman, for example. I use this analogy a lot. what would Superman be if he had his laser eyes, his superhuman strength, his ability to fly, all these things, but he didn't have his defensive capabilities? Like, would Superman be Superman if, you could come up from behind him and stab him in the back and then he just dies? So I think about like the ability to be super defensively sound and offensively powerful. But I think I can't win if I can't survive. Yeah. So I always think about, defense first, how do I put myself in a position to not die? And then how do I win? Like, I think that's like something we need to think about first is not without being necessarily conservative, but just understanding on a combative level of going, okay, my first concern would be to make sure I keep myself alive or my loved ones alive, making sure they're out of the picture, they're safe first. And then I need to take care of the situation if need be. And that has always served me well for the most part. And thankfully, I took that approach. I just saw some statistic that I was amongst the top 10 UFC fighters of all time to not get hit. I had like the lowest hit percentage, and that, like, there's not a whole lot of things that I'm like overly proud of in my career.
Pretty good.
That was something I was really, really proud of because I spent so much time thinking about that and training for that. Because again, first of all, I am a man. I'm not invincible. And I certainly lost and all that stuff. But Diego Sanchez finished me in the Ultimate Fighter finale, and BJ Penn finished me. I fought a lot of great guys, and I didn't get finished. I never got knocked out in training. I never got knocked out in a fight, thankfully. But I was TKO'd and I was submitted. But those are things that, like, in my mind, I thought, like, if I was in that position against Diego Sanchez or in that position against BJ Penn, there was no referee, there was no crowd, there was nothing. Kenny Florian probably would have been killed on the battlefield. I would take it that seriously. So for me, it was like, okay, this can't happen again. What do I need to do to fix this? And I felt like it was almost a rebirth in a lot of ways of, I get this other chance at life to do it again. And that's kind of like the huge benefit of competition, right? Or even training. It's like, it's simulated combat. Yeah. And we have this opportunity to learn from our mistakes.
So just another couple of things. I've watched a bunch of your fights leading up to this to remind myself. I watched them first time and I went back and they weren't exactly as I remembered them, but were there rounds that you remember? Are they YouTubeable rounds where you felt you had the thing that we're searching for? That moment where you are free enough. It doesn't mean it all went well, but are there moments where you're like, that's the round. That's what I'm going for?
Totally. Man, I had a few fights where I was completely in the flow state. One of them was against Sam Stout. Sam Stout was a very highly regarded 155 pounder out of Canada, and they called him Hands of Stone. And I was packing my bags. It was on the USA versus Canada card. I believe it's UFC like 52 or something like that. That was when BJ Penn fought George St. Pierre, and I was supposed to fight Sam Stout on that card, and I hurt my back and wasn't able to compete. And everyone's like, Kenny's scared of Hands of Stone, yada, yada, yada. Well, I had an opportunity to fight Sam later in the Ultimate Fighter 3 finale. And I won that fight. And that's all well and good. But I think what gave me greater satisfaction was the fact that I don't even remember the fight. Like, I do, but it was almost like everything was just effortless. I started the fight, and then my hand was getting raised. And then I fought this guy named Kit Cope, and he talked more trash than any opponent I've ever experienced in my life. And somehow I came to the conclusion that okay, let's say he does knock me out and he punches me right in my big nose, as he said he was going to do. And I thought about that. I said, okay, I've accepted that. I've accepted this idea that I may die or that death is possible or whatever, like the samurai kind of outlook. And I read a lot about that stuff, and it almost put me at peace. And I was always like, okay, if that's the worst that he can do, I've accepted that. Now I'm just free to compete and fight. And I ended up going into that flow state again. And everything, I mean, he was jacked and on steroids. Like, there was no question about it. This dude was like bright red, veins everywhere, looked totally different than the guy who was like that MTV superstar in Muay Thai and whatever. And he felt almost like he wasn't even there, Joe. Like it was such a beautiful experience. It was like a religious experience. Again, I started the fight and then my hand was getting raised and I was like, that was it. I didn't even feel like I was breathing, and I might've been during the fight, but I felt like everything was just like, there was no barriers. I was just kind of flowing and like water and moving. That was really cool. And then the fight against Takanori Gomi was another one where I felt like there was nothing this guy was going to do to me. And I wasn't conscious of it. It just happened that way. And it was beautiful, but it was also so frustrating because the more I tried to grasp it and the more I tried to replicate it in another fight, the less it came to me. It was like trying to pick up water. And, you know, life is funny that way, where the more you want it, the less it comes. You know, it's almost like trying to find a girlfriend. You know, it's like you get one girlfriend and then 5 other girls start calling. You know, it's weird. That's always kind of been a weird thing in my life. So I guess it's it's the idea of not forcing, the idea of allowing. And I think that if that thing is already in you, how do I allow it to flow through me as opposed to going, okay, now fight, Kenny, or now do this. It's just allow. And I don't exactly know that process, but it's something that you can't touch it. You can't taste it. You can't hear it, smell it. It's just there.
Yeah, that's a brilliant way to end, because that's mastery, right? That's the thing that we've talked about.
Yeah, right.
Which is, you've taken the notes, you've had honest conversations, you've found people that will allow you to absorb differently, you've been playful, you've accepted failure/death, and some combination of these things leads to the feeling that we're all chasing in any creative act. Whether you're a designer, whether you are a filmmaker, whether you're a fighter, when you can get to the point where everything you have learnt can flow through you and you are a conduit for its creativity.
Absolutely. I think about things like, you know, if I told you had 24 hours to live and you had a couple tasks to do before you left, how do you think you would perform those tasks? Like, I think about if I had one conversation with my son before I passed, how would that conversation be? How present would you be? How much of you would be there in that conversation if you had the ability to pour coffee one more time and it was your last fucking time? How would you do it? Like, things just change all of a sudden. It just becomes very different. So that idea of death, like, is closely linked to how we live life. And it's something that has always been a very powerful motivator for me.
Beautiful. We started at birth.
Yes.
We ended at death. Kenny Florian, I appreciate you a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you so. Thank you for making the time. You have 5 jobs, 5 careers. I'm very appreciative that you found this time. Really, really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe.